In the early morning hours of January 23, 1959, a ski and hiking team of 10 boarded a train heading for the Ural Mountains in the middle of the Soviet Union. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women, plus the group's leader, Igor Dyatlov. As the train slowly advanced deep into the mountainous region of the northern Ural Mountains, the group was filled with excitement, just as their journal entries would seem to indicate. One wrote, "I wonder what awaits us on this hike. Will anything new happen?" Over the next few days, the group continued to alternate between modes of transportation. First they took a bus, then they rode in the back of a farmer's truck, then by horse and sleigh, until finally they had to proceed on skis. On January 28th, one of the hikers, Yuri Yudin, had begun to feel quite ill and eventually decided to head back to base camp, while the remaining group of 9 continued as planned. This would be the last time Yuri would see his friends alive. The group resumed their expedition across the snow-covered outback and documented everything using daily journals, as well as documenting their excursion with photos. Recovered photos and journal entries suggested that the trek progressed as one would have expected, with no mention of any unforeseen complications, just lots of snow, bitter cold, and an increasingly arduous landscape. Despite a criminal investigation, several photographs, and the journal entries, the case remains unsolved, even after more than half a century. On February 1st, the group reached the base of a mountain. But not just any mountain, this was a mountain nicknamed Dead Mountain, nicknamed by the indigenous Mansi tribe, who also lived in the area. The group spent the better part of the day progressing up the slope, and eventually decided to set up camp. They were only a few hundred meters from the peak at that point. It's hard to imagine today what may have overcome the hikers, considering even the last journal entry did not seem out of the ordinary, although it is difficult to imagine such a comfort on the ridge, with the shrill howling winds and hundreds of kilometers away from any human settlements. After several weeks since the trip had begun, friends and relatives began to worry. No one had heard from Igor or any of the other members of the group. After much debate, a team of volunteers eventually headed out to search for the group. On February 26th, after days of searching, the search party was finally able to locate the camp on the slope of Dead Mountain. It was obvious to the first crew on the scene that something had gone horribly wrong. The tents were in shambles, covered by a thin coat of snow. Yet all the hikers' belongings and equipment were found neatly and orderly placed inside the tents, but the tents themselves had been slashed open with a knife from the inside. Why would the hikers have destroyed their only means of shelter during such harsh conditions? As the sun broke on the next morning, searchers discovered 9 pairs of footprints leading down the slope, towards the nearby woods. The footprints could be tracked for about half a kilometer from the tents, until the trail became completely covered by new snow. So they continued in the direction of the trail until they came upon a large cedar tree on the edge of the forest. Near an improvised campfire, they found the frozen remains of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. It would take over 2 months for the bodies of all 9 hikers to be recovered. The first 2 were found severely underdressed. No jackets, no pants, no gloves, no hats, no boots, or anything else one might expect, given the frigid climate. Only light shirts, underpants, and socks. At the time of their deaths, it would have been around -30 degrees. Strangely, the cedar tree they were near showed signs of damage, as if someone had climbed it in a hurry with branches broken up to 5 meters high. Perhaps they were attempting to locate the tents in the pitch-black darkness. Or perhaps they were trying to hide from someone or something that was coming for them in the dark. But if so, what? The next 3 hikers were found at varying distances, all found between the location of the tent and the tree line and covered by a few centimeters of snow. They were all better dressed than the previous 2, but not by much, as they still lacked the essential items, such as boots, hats, or gloves. Strangely, they were all found facing the direction of the tents, as if they were struggling to return to the tents at the moment of death. While some of them had sustained minor injuries, all 5 had died of hypothermia. Also, 4 of the hikers were found to be intoxicated at the time of death. The last 4 hikers were found at the bottom of a small hill, covered by 3 meters of snow, roughly 75 meters from the large cedar tree, in the opposite direction of the tents. 3 of them had sustained lethal injuries. 1 had a fractured skull, and 2 had multiple fractured ribs, and apparently suffered massive internal bleeding. The medical examiner believed the injuries had been sustained from a fall and compared the impacts to that of a car crash. It was determined all the injuries had been sustained while they were all still alive and could not have been inflicted by the hand of another person. 2 had been found with gaping eye sockets, and 1 of the female victims was missing her tongue. The last of the 4 had a broken nose and a deformed neck, but oddly died of hypothermia, not from his injuries. One of the most mysterious tales to the story was that 3 articles of clothing found at the scene were later found to be highly radioactive. On May 28th, the criminal case was discontinued with a cryptic and incredibly vague conclusion. The lead investigator wrote in his final report, "The cause of death was an unknown or compelling force, which the hikers were all unable to overcome." Not exactly the most satisfying answer, and barely a real conclusion at all. On top of the quite vague response, the files were sealed and were then sent to a secret archive, never to be seen again. The fact that Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue drew many conclusions. Some believe maybe it was cut off or even ripped out while she was still alive, while others argue that maybe it was eaten by scavenger animals after her death. But those who believe it was cut out while she was still alive point to the original report, which clearly showed that Dubinina had about 100 grams of blood in her stomach when she was found. Another mysterious aspect of this case is that 3 separate articles of clothing discovered on one of the bodies was found to be radioactive. As mentioned in the original report, which claims the clothes were contaminated, possibly due to radioactive dust falling from the atmosphere, or the clothes were susceptible to contamination when they came in contact with an unknown radioactive substance, not found at the site. Talk about a vague explanation. It sounds like an educated way of saying we really have no idea. Now, according to witness testimony, around the same time of the hiker's disappearance, several people claimed to have seen unidentified flying objects in the area at the base of the mountains. The unidentified objects were in the form of orbs of light, seen moving across the night sky for a few seconds, and some up to several minutes. Witnesses included 3 soldiers and 2 different hiking groups. Some witnesses also claimed that the indigenous Mansi population, as well as a group of geologists, had told them that they had observed fireballs in the sky around the time of the incident. One of the claims was from a former police officer, Lev Ivanov, who had led the official inquest in 1959, later came forward in 1990 in a published article, which included by his own admission that the investigation team had no rational explanation for the incident, and also stated that after his team reported that they had also seen flying spheres in the area during the investigation, he then received direct orders from high-ranking regional officials to dismiss these claims. Similar spheres were also observed in the region during the period from February to March of 1959 by various independent witnesses, including the Meteorology Service and the local military. However, these sightings were not noted in the initial investigation in 1959, so what exactly were they trying to cover up? The photo you are now looking at is the very last photo taken with one of the hikers' cameras. It appears to be a photo of some type of light source taken in the middle of the night, coming from the sky. One theory is that the campsite fell within the path of a Soviet parachute mine exercise. This theory alleges that the hikers, woken by loud explosions, fled the tents shoeless and shell-shocked, and quickly found themselves unable to return for supplies. Then, after some members had frozen to death, others attempted to endure the bombardment and commandeered the dead's clothing, only to be fatally injured by subsequent parachute mine concussions. Subsequently, there are indeed records of parachute mines being tested by the Soviet military in the area, around the time the hikers were there. Parachute mines detonate while still in the air, rather than upon striking the Earth's surface, and produce signature injuries, similar to those experienced by the hikers, heavy internal damage with comparably less external trauma. The theory coincides with the reported sightings of the glowing orange orbs floating, or in this case, possibly falling in the sky within the general vicinity of the hikers, which may explain the photograph of what may be one of the mines going off in mid-air. This theory, among others, uses scavenging animals to explain Dubinina's injuries. Some speculate the bodies were unnaturally manipulated due to the uncharacteristic markings discovered during the autopsies of burns to the hair and skin. Photographs of the tent also allegedly show that some of the tents were apparently erected incorrectly, something the experienced hikers were unlikely to have done themselves. Another slightly further-reaching theory is that the hikers were killed by a Russian Yeti. The theory points to the injuries the hikers sustained during the tragic event. It is believed that the injuries were such that only a creature with superhuman strength could have caused. Theorists also point out another photo taken by the group during the hike, which appears to show a large hairy creature following behind the group. The only mention of this by the hikers was noted in one of the journals, which reads as follows.
I saw it again, still do not know what or who it is.
Two members of a search party, who were the first to arrive at the scene, both also claimed that they saw footprints larger than those of a human, and that those footprints were not included in the official report. So what did the Russian government really want to cover up so badly that 9 hikers had to pay for it with their lives? Were they simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? This has been The Confidential Report. For even more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel today. And please show your support by clicking the like button on this video. For even more stories and news you deserve to know the truth about, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching The Confidential Report.